All right. So here we go, guys. Welcome back to another community call, February 9th. Hope everybody's doing well. It's great to see you guys. Badejo is with us as always. So we have a bunch of questions that came in on Twitter. We'll be getting to those. Are we getting a nice little update, Badejo, like we did last time with
Yes,
the
indeed.
nice
I'm
suite?
I'm going to start with the small status update, nothing big, and then I'm going to try to explain incentives 3.0 because I know people are eager to hear more about that.
Yeah.
And then I'll go into some questions, and hopefully we have some questions that come on the fly as well. I think that's
Yeah.
even more beneficial if people come
Yes.
think of anything, feel
Absolutely.
free to ask in the chat.
Yeah. So we'll do that. As you guys know, there's a lot of people working on this. So there's a lot of things happening, and we're tweeting about most of them. So anything from the Giza release and the Olympia and uh, what's his name? Claudius was here. He recently shared the little social preview. Like there's a lot of things happening everywhere. The onboarding thing is almost finished. It's coming along really nicely. So we'll get a
Hey,
full.
you're ruining the
No,
whole status update now,
sorry.
Robert. Come on.
I was just gonna turn it over to you.
Okay, fair.
So we'll get the full lay down from Badejo with all the juicy details. And as he said, guys, as questions come up, feel free to throw them in the chat, and we're happy to get to them. I mean, you'll get priority for your questions over the ones that were submitted in advance. So yeah, with that, we'll hand it over to Badejo, and let's see what's happening in the project.
Excellent. Thank you, Robert. Good to see you all. So I'll just jump straight into things. I'll be talking about sort of where we are, incentives 3.0, which is the next major milestone, and then some questions, and then, yeah, submit your questions in the chat if you want those addressed. All right, so where are we? So last time around, I shared this timeline with you guys. We had just released Giza Network the same day, and we were looking at incentives 3.0 today, in fact. So needless to say, that won't be happening. And then we had Olympia and the Pioneer bounty module. So bounties, I think you all know what those are, but we would be incorporating a version of crowd-funded bounties into Pioneer 2.0, which would be coming out in Olympia. Those were the next immediate milestones, and then Atlas and NFTs would be the next major product milestone on the content side. So that's how things looked. What we've decided to do is basically to bundle together the Olympia release, which, just to remind everyone, that's where we are launching Pioneer 2.0 and a totally new, fresh runtime with a new proposal system and governance and everything. And we're going to be bundling in the new bounty module support into Pioneer. That has been progressing really well, whilst we've been doing a lot of integration work on the runtime side, on the query node side, and integration testing and CLI. There's been a lot of reconciliation that's been happening for past 2-3 weeks. So basically we thought, hey, why don't we just throw that in there? That's also going to help us in incentives 3.0, as I'm going to get to. Also, incentives 3.0, which is basically the new incentive scheme for our testnets, is going to be launched on the same day. There we're pretty much on the home stretch. So Ben has been working very diligently on finishing off the new sort of CRM system that will be powering tracking, what everyone is earning, why they're earning it, who has what founding member status. We really want to open up and make that data much more available and to track it all in one location. And basically the rules and the policies have all more or less been settled for how that's going to work. And as Robert alluded to, the onboarding experience, which is going to be built into both the website, but also into Discord, will be going live at the same time. I know the Builders Working Group has been doing great work supporting us to implement a lot of that experience. I don't think anyone has really, well, actually, you did share this a long time ago, Robert. So maybe some people have seen what this is going to be like, but maybe many people don't remember that at this point. But basically, you can think of it as a onboarding experience on the website, which is going to take you through, understanding the council and the working groups and all these kinds of components of our system in order to make it easier for people to understand how things work and where they can get started. And one of the big obstacles we identified while we were trying to figure out, well, how can we make this more approachable for people, was very overwhelming to understand the project and find your way into it. And the onboarding experience is a big part of that. So that's all going to be coming out. Tentative date is February 21st. The main constraint there, I would say, is the Olympia network itself. There are some risks that are associated with Pioneer. There are some risks on infrastructure. So that's the major date. But we're going to try to bundle all this together into one pretty big milestone, I would say. And the Atlas NFT release, I mean, maybe Claudius has even more up-to-date information than myself, but the ETA there sort of remains where it was before. So that's the sort of timeline we're looking at. So that's where we are. Is that 2 weeks from today? Not that long into the future. So it's very exciting. All right. So Incentives 3.0, what is that? I guess also, like, why is it even called Incentives 3.0? We've gone through a few iterations of how to incentivize people and find valuable people and reward them. And this is the third scheme. So that's what we're calling it, Incentives 3.0. I'm going to try to explain a little bit more about how that works. And this is really the best time for people to ask for clarifications, because there are a lot of details there and nuances. So if you want that to be clarified and you suspect other people may be not sure about how things work, please ask at this time. All right. And I think we need to make this into some content also that people can look at later. Cool. Okay. So why don't we start with sort of what is the flow that a person has to go through in the new scheme? How does that work? Well, first, you will be earning joy directly. So before, you were earning founding member points, and these points had a sort of tenuous relationship to actual joy. Right now, you complete a bounty, or you do work, or you're a lead or a validator, or you refer someone, that constitutes a certain amount of actual joy tokens. And that's the first step. And the onboarding experience that I described prior, the goal of that is going to be to help people really very early and very quickly be able to earn their first joy allocation. That's the goal there. But you will also earn T-Joy. So T-Joy is basically the testnet token for the testnet. It's equivalent to cash because you can still cash it out into, I believe it's Bitcoin Cash that we still use. So some people were confused thinking maybe T-Joy is no longer a thing, or it doesn't have any value. It does. It is still useful for being able to do a lot of the different things that, like staking and paying for things on the testnet. So T-Joy is still a thing. So you earn joy and cash in parallel. That's sort of how it works. And there are really three kinds of things you can do. You can do bounties, which is not going to be orchestrated by the bounty module. You can be a council member, a worker in a working group, a lead in a working group, or a validator. So validators still exist. Or you can refer a friend. There's a refer. We always had a way to earn founding member points that was based on referring people, but that scheme didn't work that well. So we've sort of changed the rules for how that works. We may still tweak that a little bit before launch, but basically there is a way to also earn joy tokens for referring friends. All right. So you get to earning. Then the next milestone is that once you earn a certain number of joy tokens, the number isn't so important for like my explanation, but X number of joy tokens, you will need to be verified, basically, which means that we check basically who you are, that you're not a US person, that you're not already someone who's in the founding member program. So there's basically kind of like a KYC step at that point where we have to check that, you are who you say you are. And before you do that, if you keep earning joy tokens, and this is really important, you will not get credit for them. They will effectively be lost, or you won't get any credit for them. So the moment you start getting close to this limit, and that's going to be a public limit, that's going to be on our community handbook and in the dashboards that Ben is preparing, you have to get verified. Once you get verified, then you could just keep on participating. The idea is that you would sort of graduate to participate in more sort of senior roles, because you're going to earn more T-Joy, which is going to translate to more joy. I'm going to explain that later. But basically, the more involved you are, the more joy you earned, which is going to get you closer to founding member status. There is no sort of magic line in the sand where if you reach this point, you will be guaranteed to get founding member status, but there's going to be a closer relationship than there was before between getting that status and how much joy you have effectively, or points really it was before, but joy in this case you've earned. So that's sort of the flow that people will be going through. And some people on this call have already founding members, and they can continue to earn more joy. You're not capped. And other people may be very early in this life cycle, and they have to go through those steps. Am I going too quick, Robert, or is that kind of clear, do you think?
I think it's okay. Although I've
Yep.
been I've been through this before. So
yeah, of course, yes.
I guess it depends. But we'll turn it over to you guys. If it's too fast, just let us know in the chat.
All right. So that's sort of the flow you go through. Now, how does this earning happen? Well, it's all centered around a council period. Currently, we are aiming for a 7-day period. We're debating a little bit, should it be 7 days or should it be 2 weeks? So a little bit of an open question, but that's the order of time scale that we're looking at. And at the beginning of this period, JS Genesis is going to announce basically what the rules are, how much you could earn for certain things, certain kinds of scores that I'm going to be explaining. And once that's clear, basically everyone participates and does their job or their activity, whatever they want to do. And at the end of the period, JS Genesis will basically automatically compute how much joy different people have earned. So this means you no longer need to submit your forms or do any of that. So hopefully it's going to allow us to process a lot more people. And it's going to be much less sort of opaque why you're getting X rather than Y and so on. The exception here is bounties and referrals. So bounties, because it may take longer than the 7-day period, you won't get credit for them right away. It will happen whenever you actually submit the work in the bounty, but the idea is still the same. Same with referrals. It may be that you refer someone at some point in time, but it's only when they get verified that you get credit for it. So those two are an exception, but it's still sort of the same idea. Okay, so what are these rules and variables that JS Genesis sets at the beginning of the period? So they're basically, it's kind of small. I hope people can still see it, but they're basically a few different variables. The most important one is obviously how many joy tokens that can be earned in this period. That's the joy budget. Another key variable is how much T-Joy the council can spend, and that's across everything. So that's validators and bounties and working groups and everything. So there's an overall budget of effectively cash. And then there is the subsidy that comes from JS Genesis. So this is how many dollars we add to the pool of that's backing the T-Joy value, because the idea is that T-Joy is not supposed to go up or down over time. It's more or less a stable coin. So if a certain amount of T-Joy has to be spent for people to pay for infrastructure or developers or builders or something, then they're going to be cashing out to pay for their expenses and so on. And so that's where this subsidy comes from. There is also going to be a limit to this how much you can earn without getting verified. That's this cap limit. There's a referral limit, which tells you how many people can get referred in a given 7-day period. But these are sort of the main council parameters, council period parameters. A second thing that JS Genesis will be specifying, by the way, so these values can change from one period to the next. That's the important thing here. So maybe in one period, 1% over 1 7-day periods, 1% of the tokens will be distributed, whilst, well, that sounds like a lot, but you get the idea. But whilst the next one, it may be reduced or increased based on what we're seeing is happening in the network. Same with the subsidy and the T-Joy budget and so on. Another thing that we specify is also how the performance of the network will be evaluated overall. And this is a really key part of why we think the new testnets will work much better. The idea is for the council to really have an incentive to figure out if we want the system to work well, and that's what the score tries to capture. So think of everything from having low latency distributors and having good uptime on the storage providers and having a good experience for the HR working group, which is going to be working on onboarding, all these things. It's the council's job to, first of all, allocate its budget across all those different things, to fire and hire leads based on how good they're doing, to change policies and rules, and basically run the whole system. That's the idea. And this scoring scheme is basically meant to tell the council how we will evaluate the total performance of the testnet over that 7-day period. And their compensation as council members is going to be tied to how well they do on this metric. And so this score is going to basically tell the council how they should run the system, and they're going to be giving instructions to the leads and the workers based on how they're being scored over time. So those are the two things that will be specified at the beginning of each council period: these parameters and the scoring system. Now, how does that translate into actual like joy tokens for individual people, right? So there are a few different ways. So for workers, leads, validators, and for bounties, basically the way it works is you get a share of the joy budget. So not T-Joy, but the joy budget, which is equal to the share of the T-Joy that you've earned. So let me give an example to make that clear. Let's say you earned 100 T-Joy being a content curator, and the total T-Joy budget for the whole system, so that's everything that is money that there's being spent money on for this council period, is 1,000. And let's assume that the joy budget, that's how much is being distributed to everyone as a group, is 0.5%. So the first one is basically specific to you. The second one is given by JS Genesis. The third one is also given by JS Genesis. Then how much joy you personally will earn is basically equal to the share of that joy budget that your salary constitutes. So that means people who earn more, like if you are an important person, let's say, if you are doing something that requires a lot of T-Joy to incentivize, you will be earning more tokens. If you are doing something less important, let's say you're doing a bounty for 1 T-Joy in this example, perhaps, to follow this example, you will be earning a smaller share of the overall amount of joy which is available for everyone to earn. So you're keeping an eye on the chat. I'm sort of focusing just on the presentation here, Robert. So just interrupt when you feel like there's something.
Yeah, there's one question, but we can take it at the end of this whole incentives.
Yeah. So that's basically the way it works for workers, right? And so who decides the salary of a worker? It's the lead in the working group. But the lead of the working group has to respect the budget of their working group, right? Because each working group has a separate budget. So let's say I'm the content working group. Maybe I have a budget of 100 joy, T-Joy, which I have to spend across everyone in the working group. Whilst in another working group, let's say the storage providers, they may have a much bigger budget or a much smaller budget, right? And who decides that? That's the council. So you can see how the council's ability to control how T-Joy is allocated across the different working groups effectively allows them to redirect people and resources, because the joy will follow the T-Joy effectively. So that's sort of the token incentive model there. The leads are compensated in a similar way. However, the leads are their salaries directly set by the council. Keep in mind that this means different workers in the same group can have different amount of joy, right? Maybe you're a rock star builder. Even though you're not a worker and you're not the lead, you may just be one of the workers. Or maybe you work more, or whatever the reason may be. You can be earning more T-Joy than another worker, which means you'll be earning more joy than other workers in the same group. Okay, so that's the model for all those 4 things. Bounties is the same thing. Each bounty has a T-Joy budget, and you will not at the, maybe you deliver your bounty in the same council period. Maybe that's a little bit unlikely for more complicated bounties, but for simpler bounties, maybe that's okay. But it follows the same basic model of the share of the T-Joy budget that your compensation constitutes. All right. Then when it comes to referring a friend, it's basically a fixed. So there's like X number of joy per friend that was referred. And the person, of course, needs to be verified. So it's like people can't like invite themselves or like their 10-year-old brother or whatever it would be. They will be verified. And if you should all read the handbook rules, there's some pretty strict rules around people doing abusive things, trying to trick the system. So that's going to be pretty harshly punished. People will lose their joy allocations if we find people trying to sort of go against the spirit of the system. So the rules are going to be laid out pretty clearly, and it's going to be pretty strict penalties. All right, so we've covered referrals, bounties, workers, leads, validators, same with validators. Then it comes to council members. Okay, so those are the ones that are a little bit different because they're, in a way, they're like the coordinators of the system. So every council member earns the same amount of T-Joy, so cash, and JS Genesis decides how much T-Joy they earn. In the future, that's just going to be a runtime parameter that can be updated using a proposal, but for now, it's going to be fixed. And their model is, in a sense, very similar to everyone else, namely the share of the total T-Joy budget that they get equals the amount of joy that they get. But that couldn't be the end of it, because then they would have no incentive to do a good job because they're going to get the same amount no matter what. So what is additionally the case for them is that this ratio is weighted by the performance of the system squared. So there is this network performance score, which is a number between 0 and 1, 1 obviously being good, in which case, 1 squared is just 1. And so you just earn the maximum amount, which is the share of the T-Joy budget, which exists. And the lower you go, the more severely you're punished, because it's a square and you're going to have a lower share of what you could have earned. So that's the reason why the council is going to do a good job as we've defined it in the scores. They want to have a high score so that they get a number close to 1, so that when it's squared, it leaves more or less their compensation intact. And the smaller they go, the more severely they're going to be penalized. And the way they do that is to make sure this total score is as high as possible, which is stated in terms of performance of storage providers and all these things that I sort of alluded to before. All right, so that's the model. In this model, the council is much, much more important. They have a much more interesting and complicated job. They really need to supervise and make sure they have the right people in the right positions. They are severely penalized for leaving performance on the table, so to speak. It really hits home in terms of the joy that they earn. It's likely going to be a smaller council, as many of you have seen. That isn't inherent to the scheme, but experience has just shown that you get a free rider problem in the council if it becomes too big, at least here on testnet. So we're probably going to make it smaller, but we want it to be as big as possible. So if that works, if that sort of works out, we will try to increase it until we get feedback that things are going poorly, or we look at the scores and we see things are going poorly. All right. So there is a model which tries to tell you how much value is distributed across different activities based on some inputs that you can provide. There's a link here at the bottom. There is substantial value at stake, as you can gather from this. For this portion of the founding member program, there is 10% percentage points of value at stake. I think in this model there was something like 0.3% was distributed on a weekly basis, which is a lot of money. So you can see the dollar amounts are very, very large. The leads here are earning 40,000 per 7-day period. Again, not cash, but in joy equivalent value. Distributors are earning quite a lot. These values will change over time, and this may not be the actual values you use for the first week, but I don't think it's that far off either. Cool. Okay. So that was a lot of information, Robert. Do I need to go back, restate anything, or?
If you can go back to, I think it was the one where you're showing how to figure out how much this one, yeah. So the joy budget is 0.5% of what?
Of the sort of joy token distribution at launch. So
okay,
the whole yeah. So that's a certain, you could convert that into X number of literal tokens. The only reason not to do that is because we don't want to lock ourselves into saying that there's going to be a total number of like 1 billion tokens at launch. We want to just keep that to be a free parameter for now. Yeah. So that's why we're just stating it in terms of percentages.
Yes. Okay.
So yeah.
Cool. And there was a question from Isonar. He says, it sounds like the incentives 3.0 is 100% on-chain process.
Yes, I mean, I'm not sure. Maybe in what way the old scheme was not. I mean, there was the whole KPI side of things. He's certainly right in that you don't need to write these big essays and send them to Ben, who has to sit and parse through them and figure out what's going on, and then you don't know why. Like in this scheme, you're going to know exactly why you earned what you earned, and you're also going to know exactly where you should be going, right? So maybe there are like 4 things you could do based on your skills. You will know, okay, I need to go to this one because there I can look back the X number of periods. This is what they earned, and it will be very clear to you. So in that sense, maybe you could say it's more on chain also. But there's still people in the loop here. I mean, we are certainly defining here what success looks like for the council, which impacts how much they get and also how they are shifting resources. So, for example, if we made content curation extremely important for the score, maybe it ends up that the council spends all of the T joy, that is all of the joy, on just council content curators, right? That would be kind of stupid, but you still get the idea. So I mean, I would say maybe in that sense it is more on chain, but yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. All right. I guess I'll just move on to the community questions that we received. I don't have that many actually, so maybe I was expecting that it would take longer to go through all these slides. So I'll just jump right in. First question is revenue and profit. What is the project's revenue model? In which ways do you generate revenue and slash profit? I guess most important thing to clarify is you in this case should not refer to JS Genesis, the company launching Joystream or anything like that. There's no profit per se built into the system for that actor. There is, in a sense, a revenue model for the DAO. It's not literally revenue. There isn't revenue with treasury and so on, but there's a value accrual, I guess is the way you would state it. So there are a few ways you capture value in the DAO. One way, it's all basically comes down to burning. And it's burning associated with a few different activities that we think are going to be interesting for people to do. So one is definitely, issuing NFTs and selling them, this kind of stuff. That costs a certain amount. That's a tunable parameter, so I can't tell you how much, but that there is a channel for value capture there, as sort of a fee. And then there is a fee associated with running gateways, which to this person probably is a new concept. So think of that as someone who is running a consumer-facing product who is monetizing the end users through some kind of a scheme, ads or subscriptions or whatever they want to, and they are paying effectively for access to the system on behalf of their users, so their users don't need to hold crypto and in order to consume content and so on. So that's like maybe the most inherent revenue model to the DAO that ties into like the core use case of like content consumption and monetization. So those are like the primary ones I think this person is trying to learn about. Buying token. How can I buy this token? Is it available on any exchange? Can you please share about your burn system and buyback system? How does burn work for your token? I guess I answered part of this already. So you cannot buy the token now, given that we are on testnet and we haven't had any and don't have any explicit plans for any public sales. I will say I've been surprised by the number of people in the community who have requested doing something like a community or a public sale. It's not really something that's important for the like funding and operations of the project. So that would be something that could be worth doing if it's I guess some people wanted to have the token, but they're not willing to be founding members. Although I would say you have a better prospect at getting a sizable chunk of tokens being a founding member than being an investor, unless you're very, very wealthy. But some people are. I can say that. I've been surprised by people who already have a sizable amount of tokens wanting to get more. So if you think it's a good idea, feel free to let us know. That gives us more of a reason to prioritize it, and we can evaluate doing some kind of a community sale, but there's no such sale live, certainly, or planned. And the question in terms of burn and buyback system, I guess I kind of explained that already here on the revenue and profit model. So rewind back and look at that, I guess. Funding for project development. First of all, main priority is having enough fund. Does your team financially capable to run this project? Do you have enough fund for its development? Can you tell us how your project generates the profit? I love how there's so many questions bundled on top of each other. Yes, we have more than sufficient funding to operate and run and launch and do everything we're planning to do. We've done 2 rounds of funding for sort of Joystream, the video platform DAO, and the most recent one we haven't announced the details of, but I think we're close to doing so. Isn't that right, Robert? I think the final date has been like a little bit elusive, but maybe actually, at the risk of planning on the air, maybe it should be after this deadline. I don't know. This the 21st, probably. That probably sounds like a good idea. But so
yeah,
go ahead.
Sorry, I was muted. You and I have to coordinate this, hopefully, with some media outlets, so that may, dictate the date a bit.
Mm-hmm. And certainly the reason we haven't announced it sooner is just because that's a reason for new people to pay attention to you. So the more you have available for them to engage with, and the more understandable you are. Now I'm thinking specifically in terms of the onboarding. That's a good idea to have done in advance, to have the announcement be of some strategic value, basically, rather than just being a vanity event of just saying, "Hey, we did something." This person isn't asking about this, but the plan has certainly been that this is the last financing event for JS Genesis. The only reason to do any more funding would be if it's some kind of community push. So if that's the case, I repeat myself here. People will have to let us know and explain to us maybe why it could be useful for the project and so on. And then we could certainly consider it if it isn't too costly in terms of time and attention. I can imagine doing any kind of a good sale with a marketing and everything with any reasonable lead time will probably take a lot of your time also, Robert. So that's another consideration. NFT features. What functions will NFT from Joystream have? So it's actually, I think, well, how do I tackle this one? So NFTs in Joystream have certainly sort of a blockchain level functionality feature set, which is maybe what this person is asking about. And at that level, it has basic sort of auctioning systems. And there are 2 kinds of auctions for NFTs. There's what are called open auctions, where you can just, for NFT, which is on auction, you can just bid, and the person who owns it will know this and may choose to accept it or not. And then your bid's going to be locked in for a certain period of time. That's the open auction we have. We also have something called an English auction, where you basically, if there's a valid bid, the highest valid bid will get the NFT. And there's a certain period of time. And actually at the end of the bidding period, there's this extension thing that happens where you get a little bit of extra time to avoid people sniping NFTs and so on. But that's like the basic NFT features that when it comes to auctions. You can also have sort of peer-to-peer transactions where you just offer an NFT to someone for a given price or for free, and then they can accept it or not, sort of like an atomic swap. So in the native currency here for all this is Joy. You can also, I feel like I'm forgetting one of them now. I don't remember if there is anything else. Probably is. At this point, I've forgotten that the natives of
go ahead. Perhaps that social token holders can earn a share of the revenue that is
okay. So I was mainly thinking about the transactional layer of like how can they swap ownership. But yes, you're right. When this happens, there is a possible royalty for the original issuer, like the person who made the content and issued the NFT. And there's a social token feature to Joystream where people who hold a social token of this creator get a share of that fee. So if Robert makes an NFT for some video where he goes fishing or something that gets sold for 10,000. If he has a social token, let's say he set it up so that 20% of the revenue for his channel goes to social token creators, that will be part of the revenue that's diverted to them. So I guess that's sort of an NFT related feature as well. I think that's everything that has to do with like the core transactional layer. Obviously, they're going to be interoperable. This is something we haven't built in yet, so that's certainly the goal before we go live. But we want to be able to have you use the interoperability features of Polkadot to like take your NFT from Joystream and move them into some other marketplace, or certainly that it works with wallets that are sort of standard in the space, that it can go into other DeFi type protocols and give you some like fractionalization or financialization capability. Oh, that would be really cool. So that's also, I guess, an NFT feature that's unlocked by the ecosystem that we're part of, which is the Polkadot ecosystem for those who don't know. There's obviously the other side of it, which is that the NFTs are sort of displayed in the native consumer experience of Joystream. I think I would think of that as actually a pretty important distinguishing feature, because Joystream is not actually primarily an NFT marketplace, unlike OpenSea or some of these platforms. It is actually a consumer platform, and so the NFTs are going to be on display for a much larger audience in a context where they have a lot of meaning. Unlike most marketplaces where, you know, it's likely that the only people that see your portfolio on an NFT marketplace are other NFT investors. It's not people who have primarily an affinity to the content that your NFT is about, who will then get naturally exposed to that and who may be intrigued or interested in and sort of jumping into that NFT side of things as a result of engaging with the content. So I think that's actually a pretty important. I actually don't know that I've seen any other product or platform where that's the case, and I think that's going to be a big differentiator for us. That's going to help our NFTs to be a lot more meaningful. So yeah, I think I answered that one pretty comprehensively. I see there's some stuff in the chat, but I'm going to ignore it until you tell me otherwise, Robert.
Yeah,
awareness. What?
There's a bunch of questions, but you can. How many questions you have left from the?
I have this is the second to last one.
Okay, great. So we'll do those, and then we'll get to the chat.
Cool. Okay, awareness. What are the plans to educate and raise awareness and adoption among the community to make more people understand about the project easily? I would say the primary thing we're doing is the onboarding experience that Robert has been working on with a bunch of other people in the community. And yeah, so that I think is going to be the best way for people to understand how to, so people already in the community would benefit from looking at it, but it's going to be even better for getting new people who are not in our community, but maybe in the Polkadot community or DAO community or some other adjacent community to learn about us. That is probably the most sort of potent short-term initiative that we've executed upon. And I think that's going to have a big effect. I think we're going to, our documentation is going to be leveled up quite a bit as well, where a lot of stuff is going to be explained and more accessible. Not on GitHub, but like in a more sort of documented, human-friendly format. And I think Pioneer 2 itself also will help awareness in the community, because Pioneer 2 just raises the bar in terms of trying to be a user-friendly product. And that's one of the primary ways you can understand the system, maybe not the project, but the system. But then after all of that, we are now starting a more sort of general outbound sort of phase of the project, where we're trying to get people who don't already know about us to know about us. And that's in the early stages. And that's maybe something you can say more about, Robert, that the various things you're thinking about. But that's maybe what most people think about when they think about, well, awareness and marketing. That's what they're actually thinking about.
Yeah, for sure. So I touched on this in our marketing meeting earlier this week, but there's this concept, if you guys are interested, by a guy named Eugene Schwartz, who kind of identify this concept of there's like 5 different awareness levels that you can sort of categorize people. And so depending on where you are, what type of business you're in and what type of stage you're in, you want to attract a different type of person in terms of their level of awareness, because basically on one extreme you have people who are like completely aware. So this is like, my dad was here over the weekend, I'm trying to explain to him what Joystream is, he's never bought Bitcoin, completely like on the not aware side. Those people are very difficult to get to because it's super expensive, because you have to educate them so much. And then on the other side of that spectrum, you have, these are people they may not necessarily be in Joystream, but they may be paying attention to another, let's say, decentralized video project, or they might be in another DAO. So they have a fairly good idea of sort of how this whole crazy idea works of like, hey, you can just show up to this organization, start working, and you'll get paid in this weird currency on the internet, right? So for Joystream, we're in this stage now where it doesn't really make any sense whatsoever to sort of go out there and try to capture the attention and the awareness of like the casual YouTube consumer, right? Makes no sense. We're not on the mainnet. They can't invest in the token. There's not a ton of content on there. So that's just for a later stage. So as Badeo was kind of touching on, for now, the onboarding is sort of, it's on that other side of the spectrum. It's appealing to people that are, most aware, but also like a couple of steps back, where they may be in crypto, but they might not be contributing to anything. But they would like to, if they found a project that they were sort of interested in, then they would come on. So that's kind of the first group that we're going to be targeting, and we're having meetings about that now. And I'm basically thinking about that all day and researching and like coming up with plans for us. So that is sort of the next thing for us on that front. Isonar asked for the guy's name. It's Eugene Schwartz. I can write it in the chat. Sure. I think he was a marketer. Very smart guy though. So yeah, that's what I'll say on the awareness side. So
great. Yes. So a lot of things coming is the TLDR. Last question, JS Genesis on mainnet, who will have the final say in business development and decisions? How influential is the elected representative in terms of business and development decisions? Will the company have some kind of veto power when it comes to decision making? Good question. So definitely no. No one will have any veto power in the decision making, certainly in any kind of formalized sense. The business, which I assume is meant to imply JS Genesis, the only influence it will have while it is around in the ecosystem is that it may organize some of the people who have some kind of vision or an idea for how things ought to go, and people may choose to listen to them. The council and the token holders may choose to listen to them, or they may not. And I think a large part of that comes down to merit and experience. That kind of is what I'm already seeing. So, for example, everyone in the community largely takes very seriously what Tomato says as a result of his long involvement in developing and thinking about and working on the system. So I think that's kind of the way people will sort of loosely be looking to other people they trust who may have good ideas that they align with in terms of how things should go. Nothing formalized, certainly. So, and that's why really, what's one of the many things that distinguish Joystream from many other systems is that once launched, it will be very, 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 very mature, right? Most other platforms launch with like maybe most of them maybe launch with nothing or just the asset or something like that. Some people launch with maybe something basic working. We will be launching with like every major critical ingredient already working and autonomous governance. So I think while in many other projects, you see that there is a foundation or a company which is pivotal in supporting the project, that is much less likely to be the case in Joystream, just because it isn't required. And I think the fact that it isn't required will embolden people to want to go their own way. They're going to have the resources, they're going to have the way to collaborate and coordinate, and they're going to know each other well. I think many of the founding members in our community, by the time we're on mainnet, will have known each other for many, many months, more than a year. The most senior people at this point, many years. And so there's going to be a lot of social capital that allows the community to be self-directed in a way that I think is going to be really exciting, but also means JS Genesis is going to be much less significant than in other projects.
Question on that, by the way, was that like a technical decision, or because without knowing all the details, I looked into Theta quite deeply the other day, and they're like, oh, we launched mainnet 3.0. So I think they probably went the other route, right, where they kind of launched way earlier, and then there's just like different versions of mainnet. So what was the rationale for going this route? Is that a too deep question for now?
That is kind of a deep question. There's a mix of reasons. I think what we should do is we should make like a history of Joystream, like content series or something, and then we can get into like the whys and not this way or the other way. We did consider a very different way in the beginning, so I'll just sidestep the whole question. How about that?
Sure, we can do that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. So yeah, we do have, so as you guys might have noticed, some of these questions were a little bit more, I guess, for the masses, in the sense that a lot of these questions did come from people who aren't super deep into our community. But we have a lot of questions here in the chat. So I think we'll go a lot deeper now. Before we do that, I do want to actually invite Claudius to touch on one of the Atlas questions. So Isonar, we didn't miss your questions. I did see them. So actually, let me ask to unmute Claudius, because there is this first question for me, Sonar, which is, well, let's do this first of all. Badeo, can you just give like, I don't know, 20, 30-second intro of who Claudius is? You've been working with them a lot longer than me, so that everybody else.
How long? I don't, at this point, I don't know how long we've been working together. It feels like quite a while, but Claudius basically is the tech front end engineer Jedi that runs the Atlas team. So everything you see when you go to play.joystream.org is his and other people's creation, but he runs the whole thing. So yeah, he has been there since the very earliest days of Atlas, and yeah, I don't know what else to say except to say that he's perfect. A front end Jedi. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted people to get some context. So Claudius, thanks for joining us. So the question is, Atlas currently doesn't support looped feedback. I guess for video NFTs, it's integral to be shown in a loop. Have you considered adding this feature to the Atlas roadmap? And I guess I wanted to add to that, Claudius, if there's anything else that's on the roadmap, like for example, personally, I'm one of those 1.5x guys, right? Of like speeds up video. So is that something that's on the roadmap for Olympia? And subtitles, like what can you tell us about what's on the features list in the near future?
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much, guys, and hello to everybody. That was a great introduction, Badeo. Yeah, so in terms of the product backlog and like the features we want to introduce, there's certainly a lot of things. It'd be hard to mention all of them. First, to answer the specific question about looped playback, that's actually something I think we haven't considered yet. And I think the question may stem from a slightly different understanding of what an NFT might be on Joystream. So like if you go to like an OpenSea, for example, or any other NFT marketplace, usually what you see there are like NFTs that represent some art basically. And like if the NFT is a video, that's like usually like a 10-second video, maybe some looped graphic or something that just like plays really quickly, and you can loop it around. I think on our side, the emphasis is more of like proper videos that you see on YouTube, like maybe 5-10 minutes long. Yes. Like it can be of any length basically, but it just like represents this video as a video on the video platform, not necessarily some piece of art. Although I don't see any reasons for it to not be considered art as well. So yeah, so the answer, I guess, is it depends on where you would like to see that video played. On our platform in Atlas, the main place would be like the video page. So basically, like on YouTube, you go to a specific video, you have like a full screen playback. That's where we mainly aim to display those videos. The looped playback would make maybe more sense in some way of like a some smaller thumbnail, or just like a grid of videos and NFTs maybe, and playback there. So yes, so that's certainly an area that we're going to explore and like see. I don't think our direction with NFTs is set at this point, like very directly. We're still open to exploring different ideas on how to integrate with other platforms, how to display NFTs, how to let community interact with NFTs. Maybe the owners of NFTs could like share some special message on video page. There are many topics many areas you would like to explore. So for now, this feature isn't something we've considered, but like if that's something you would like to see, feel free to open like a GitHub issue with some specifics, and I think we'll be very open to considering that. But yeah, I think like once we actually roll out the NFTs, like the idea of what we want to achieve should be much clearer. And yeah, I think it's all very cool stuff. I can't wait out to ship it to you guys. So yeah. So that's the NFT. In terms of other features, we have a bunch of things. Like the NFTs are obviously the biggest ones that are coming to Atlas. For other things that are quite exciting, this is something that the community has been asking for quite a while. Those are like reactions to videos and also comments under videos. This has been coming for quite some time. We are already quite deep in the design phase. Designs are almost ready at this point, I would say, for some parts of these at least. So like in a month, I would say we will start implementing that. So that's coming pretty soon. In terms of player features, one of the next things we want to tackle are also subtitles for videos. So ability to add subtitles in multiple languages. So like if there's like a community call uploaded by Joystream channel, you guys don't have to do a complete separate video with just the subtitles applied on top. You can just like drop the subtitles file. We can upload it, and like anybody who watches can see subtitles in their own language. So that's something that's coming to the player in some time. And with that opportunity, we will likely be adding all their features to the player itself as well. Like for example, the playback speed, so you can watch on 2x if needed. Maybe looping of the video. We will also probably at some point want to introduce like transcoding, so you can watch the video in different resolutions, etc. But those things will be sometime in the future. But yeah, like the roadmap is full of exciting stuff. There's a lot of great features we want to bring in. So yeah,
that's awesome. Yeah, really good stuff. And on the looping side, I totally agree with that. I mean, you sort of have collectibles or content, like we're selling actual content, so it is a little bit different. However, as a parent, I would like to see the looping feature for when my kid's watching some 3-minute video that they want to watch 1,000 times. I don't have to go back and click the button every time. So I think that's a stronger reason to have a looping feature. But thanks a lot, Claudius. Really cool stuff happening on the Atlas front. And should we dig into some of the other questions, Badejo, from the chat here? Some of the deeper ones, perhaps?
Sure.
Cool.
So excited about Atlas now.
Yeah. There's a lot of awesome stuff on the horizon. Okay, we can start with this one from Freak Static. So if you fix some bug or do some task that is not registered on the chain and there isn't a bounty for that, how will that fit in the new incentive system? So would that be sort of the make your own bounty side of things?
You can make your own bounty. I guess he's assuming you didn't, right? Now, in that case, the last hope is that it's your job. So like you work in the builders working group. In that case, it's accounted for in that way. But if it's not a bounty, it's not your job, and like there's no way to capture it, then you would get no credit for it. And I see the issue with that, but there I would just say maybe we should have a culture of telling people, well, if you want to get credit for it, go and ask for bounty or get spending proposal. In this scheme, there's no credit for spending proposals. So if you spend $500 to buy a poster and put it on the wall in some town in the world, currently in this scheme, the council would not have an incentive to do that because it would just mean they lose money on something that doesn't increase the score for them. So I would say probably through the bounty system, or perhaps we should reevaluate the status of the spending proposal. But the problem is always, how do you make it in the interest of the council to give money to that in a way where they give money to good things, but they don't give money to bad things? It's not super easy if you think about any kind of contribution, right? If you think about, maybe if you say it's for a issue which has already been, let's say it's an Atlas feature where a college has already added the label like like good first issue or something, at least then we know for a fact that, this is sensible and that's kind of an objective metric. But for any kind of thing you could do which could be helpful, it's really hard to capture that in a system. So that's why we've tried to narrow it down. Also, what we've seen is in general that there isn't that much of this sort of totally sporadic, unpredictable ways of contributing. Most of it tries to fit within the mold that we set up. So hopefully that would still work here. Yeah, but other people have made this point as well.
Mm-hmm. Good. Let's see here. All right, next question from Leet Joy. Could councils decide on increasing or decreasing working group members count in the new system?
So the member count in a working group is the leader who decides. So a leader could in principle hire 10,000 people who all get 1 TJoy per week. So the council doesn't directly control this. Of course, the council could say, hey, Mr. Storage Lead, why on earth do you have 700 people hired? Please let them go and pick a more sensible number or you're going to get fired. So in that sense, they can do it, but they don't regulate it on chain in an explicit way. And the idea here is that the storage lead, in this case, for example, what he wants to do as a service that he provides to the council is basically to make sure that the performance of the system in terms of the storage system in their scoring metric is high. Basically, that's what he wants to do in order for them not to fire him, in order for him to get higher budgets, this kind of a thing. And so therefore, he or she will have an incentive to really get the most out of the budget that he has. Or if he says, you know what, guys, JS Genesis has specified that, it should be possible to store 50 terabytes or something like that, and we currently just don't have the money for it. You guys have to give me more TJoy, or it's not going to work. Then they have a decision to make. So maybe they have to give less money to the content curators and prioritize that because that's not so important for their final score, and increase his budget, and then maybe he or she hires more members. So it's supposed to be dynamic in sort of the way it is in a company. You give a department more resources when what it's supposed to be doing for the organization requires more resources. Hopefully that was clear.
Good. All right. Next question is definitely on the deeper front, dealing with some practical, actual challenges, right? So Isonar says, big topic to discuss. Ops Alpha Lead L1 Dev, who I believe is on the call. Let me have a quick, he is. And I do want to give a shout out to both him and Alexander, who I believe is here as well, who are doing a great job with the onboarding. So big props to those guys.
Or gals.
Back to the question. He created a proposal to fire himself. Essentially, he wants to leave the role for quite some time, but there are no volunteers to fill that role. Is JS Genesis in a position to install working group leads in such extraordinary situations, or hire them from the market for that matter?
Sorry, which role is this?
Working group lead for
L1 Dev. I mean, that must be the builders, right? Okay. Well, yeah. First of all, I guess very bummed that L1 Dev would not be the lead. Other people should be able to try as well, but I hope we are still able to get the benefit of your participation in L1 Dev, and that it's only temporary. But can we do it? No, that would be totally against the spirit of the testnet. The point here is the council needs to get a high score to get joy tokens. The score comes from the way they're evaluated on a variety of dimensions, one of them being how well their builders group is working. If L1 Dev is saying sayonara and someone else is needed, the council has to think, okay, well, currently this group is getting, I don't know, $500 a week. We're not able to track substitutes. We're not able to find people. Then they have to somehow solve the problem of either increasing the budget or going out into the world and finding people. And they're supposed to do this job, not JS Genesis. So that's, while we could, we definitely won't. And as long as the council can't solve the question, they will be suffering the consequences, just to be a little bit harsh about it. Now, what the council can say is, like, let's say this situation persists for one council, two councils, three councils, they can come and say, hey guys, what you're asking for, it just doesn't work. You're asking for too much. Our joy allocations we're not earning as much as we would like, I suppose. So you need to increase the budget. You need to increase as I said here, the joy budget, which basically will result in more joy overall being available. Maybe the USD subsidy, which is part of adding value to the TJoy. And so, no, definitely this is a problem the council has to solve, and that's sort of the point of their role.
Cool.
Yep.
That works. Then we had a question from Mr. Tomato. So unlike many other projects, there are no smart contracts on Joystream. Is this a benefit when it comes to security or functionality?
I don't think it's a benefit in terms of security per se, having smart contracting environment, which you can add to a substrate chain. So we did in fact have a version of the content directory that was implemented on the EVM. So smart contracts in the way they're done on Ethereum and a lot of other chains now. That isn't per se unsafe for the whole Joystream chain. It is kind of tricky to make smart contracts without bugs, but at least the failures are isolated to the relevant person or who's deploying them. Now, I would say if Joystream was going to be built in terms of smart contracts versus native Rust code the way it is, I think we are in a far better position in terms of having a secure system that doesn't have some kind of a bug, because we're not using Solidity versus Rust, which we are using. So that's a benefit for us. But we could still add a smart contracting environment to the substrate chain, to the Joystream chain. In order for that to be interesting, right? Because if it's just this EVM thing that's in the Joystream chain that can't do anything, it's kind of like, well, what do you do with that? No one's going to come to the Joystream system just to use it as a general purpose smart contract platform. That doesn't make any sense. So what we'd have to do is we'd have to bridge the environment from the EVM in the Joystream chain to the non-EVM side of our runtime. So certainly all the balances and this kind of stuff, but also like the content directory and working groups. You need to somehow bridge them in a way where someone can make a smart contract. And in the smart contract, you could read, let's say, what's going on with the working groups and the members and the contact directory and the NFTs and the forum, all this kind of stuff. That's the only thing that really I could see making sense. And that could have some value potentially. It could allow people to build some new interesting feature, the Joystream, on chain in a permissionless way. And that could have value. So you don't need to convince everyone to do a runtime upgrade, all this kind of stuff to add something to the chain. So maybe that's something that ends up being a part of the chain in the future. I think it needs certainly a lot more planning and care. It's not urgent, but there is room for adding interesting things to the Joystream platform by adding a smart contracting environment to it. That is, I would say that is correct. So yeah.
Cool. Good stuff. We got two more shorter questions. So guys, if you have anything else you want to get clarity around or anything you want to ask, now would be the time to think about that. Throw it in the chat. We got two more questions and then we'll wrap up here today. This one's probably going to be a one-word answer. Can I buy NFTs with Joy coins in the future? I assume that's how it works in Atlas, right? Okay, so you're using Joy coins to actually buy the NFTs. And there is the final question for now, which is also from Isonar. Been very active today. Well done. Is the Joystream help desk obsolete now that the handbook is in the works? And how can the community be involved in co-creating the handbook?
Yes, the help desk is about to be extinguished soon. And the handbook will take over. I think the community should actually not be working directly on the handbook for the immediate future. We're going to be introducing Notion boards for each of the working groups and for the council, where the community can have their own knowledge base, which allows them to accumulate processes and onboarding documents and stuff for how those groups should work. And they could do that in a way which doesn't require our involvement in any way. And whenever there's a new lead or a new council, we will give them access to that Notion board. And maybe that becomes the base of, let's say, the stuff that gets incorporated into the Joy Neural, to the final Joystream handbook once we go on mainnet. But right now, I think the handbook, which is replacing the help desk, needs to be quite curated and well done, and like done by one person in order to make sense and explain what's going on in the test net and everything. So therefore, the handbook is not really going to be a community environment, let's say, in the near term. Yeah, but I think those Notion boards are probably going to be actually much higher velocity, much more interesting, much more information that I don't have and no one in Genesis is able to pick up, because we're not participating in all those roles all the time. So yeah.
Awesome. All right. That's really it there that we have for today. I think we covered a lot of ground, a lot of great things happening. Obviously, a lot of people working on this, a bunch of questions, kind of more surface level stuff, and then also some deeper stuff. Short question just came in from L1 Dev. What is the best process for suggestions like WIP voting for leads? I forget what that means.
This is a feature, I think.
Work in progress.
What's the best? Yeah, so this is a feature that L1 Dev suggested, I think, for the runtime. But I think I added this label post mainnet because basically at this point we are very conservative about taking big outside ideas for the runtime. We've been building for quite a while. We're heading into an audit as of mid to late March. So I would say if anyone wants to do anything radical to the runtime, you should have your eyes on post mainnet as the goal, because it's really hard to get a lot of big ideas for changing things this late before we launch. Because you change the runtime a little bit, and then you have to change the query node and Pioneer and the tests and the CLI, and like the whole world has to change as a result of that. So it's much more expensive than you'd think.
Yeah. And you said there's an audit. Is that mid to late March that's scheduled and happening?
Correct.
Very cool.
The second audit for the Joystream blockchain. So that's a big milestone as well.
Yeah, for sure. So that'll be exciting. I think that's the wrong word to use. I think the words audit and exciting have never been used in the same sentence before.
It'll be nice to get that. Certainly.
Yeah. For you especially, I would imagine. Guys, thank you so much. I've done many of these calls before, not just here, but in my old career as well. And I've never seen the attendance rise as the call goes on. So it does seem again that you guys are enjoying these. So we'll hopefully keep doing them. Thank you so much for showing up. Thank you for the participation. Thank you to all of you guys working on the project. We appreciate you. And we'll see you guys in the 49 different channels that we have. I always make that joke. But no, we'll see you in Discord. And then, have a great evening. And that's it, unless Berejo has anything else to add.
That's it. Thank you very much, everyone. Good to see you.
All righty. Thanks, guys. Ciao.